It was a beautiful tropical November day on the beach of Elmina. The Atlantic was its usual vibrant self, lashing against the sandbanks of Elmina, not far from the castle named after it. Yao and Peter were having a wonderful time playing football along the coastline in the late afternoon warm sunshine and breeze. They were getting big now, Abena thought, as she read her romance book, swinging gently from her hammock tied between two coconut trees. Her parents had asked her to watch her two younger brothers as they played on the beach. The beach was deserted today. The fishermen had long headed off to market on this Saturday. A few of them were back, repairing their boats along the beach. Otherwise, there were no people around. Abena looked up from her book. She was enjoying the peace out here on the beach. The skyline looked gorgeous. Something was odd about it today, though. She took off her sunglasses and squinted into the horizon, musing to herself that at 18, she was already losing her eyesight. She squinted at a tiny dot bobbing up and down on the water. Was it a shark? The Atlantic Ocean was not known for sharks, she reminded herself. Maybe it was a whale, or a small fishing boat with an odd shape. She studied the object, now fully invested in it. Then she jumped. Oh my God, there seemed to be a person attached to the object. She got up from the hammock. Peter and Yao were also staring at the ocean, no doubt also distracted by the object fast coming into view. She noticed that one of the fishermen repairing his boat along the shore had stopped working on the boat and was now running to another group of men further down the shoreline. Hey boy, she could hear them shouting now. 3 of the men got into a boat and were paddling towards the object. Another man was now swimming along, all of them heading towards the ocean as it violently lashed the shoreline with powerful waves. She panicked as she saw that her little brothers were following suit. Bra, Peter, Yao, stay on the beach, she shouted at them as she headed towards the beach to get them. She could see that the waves were meters high. She couldn't risk her darling brothers, aged 12 and 14, getting hurt. It was now that she could see clearly what was unfolding before her eyes. There was a man sprawled on a log that was bobbing its way towards the shore. She could hear the fisherman declare, Oyo Bruni. Na Oriya Denwaha. It's a white man. What is he doing here? Peter and Yao were at her side as they looked incredulously on the scene before them. The men were now moving the man onto their boat. The log he was on bobbed further away. They could now see that the log was part of a raft that was floating further down the ocean line. Abena and her brothers watched as the unconscious white man was brought to the shore. Abena stared at him. He looked quite young, this blonde man, bare-chested with only a pair of shorts on. He was bleeding from his left lower leg. Kafrau Mame, one of the men was saying. She sprang to action. Her mom was a nurse. She would know what to do. Peter and Yao outran her to their house not far from the beach and hollered for their mum. She immediately ran after them, registering the urgency in their voices. The rest of the day was a blur to Abena. By the time she and her mom and brothers reappeared at the beach, the young man was doubled over, vomiting and coughing. She watched as her mom thumped on his back and spoke reassuringly to him in English. He looked around, a little frightened and dazed. His blonde hair glistened in the failing sunlight as he tried to get up and failed multiple times. Who are you? He kept asking. Where am I? Don't worry, you are safe, Abena's mom, Dori, was saying to him. What is your name? The young man gave a relieved half smile as he registered Dori's voice. I am Tom. Who are you? Dori, I am a nurse. I will take care of you. Thank you, Dori. You are a nice lady. Tom's eyes rolled over in his head as he passed out again. It wasn't until a few days later that Abena and her family got to know more about their instant house guest. Tom Weston was a 26-year-old British guy who was on a round-the-world sailing expedition. He had started out with a friend, but somewhere in South America, his friend had abandoned the expedition and Tom was determined to make it on his own. He had encountered bad weather and had had to abandon ship. He didn't know anything more. He wasn't sure how he ended up on the raft or even how long he was out there for. He was starving, and for the last 2 days, all he had done was eat and eat and eat. Abena found it funny that at last, here was a man to rival the appetite of her younger brothers. She helped her mum to tend to the wounds of Tom. She helped her father as he tried to help Tom rehabilitate and build strength in his left leg that had been damaged while he was out at sea. She laughed with him and cried with him as he wondered how he could ever make contact with his family again in England. She soon became his confidant and friend. Abena took Tom to her favorite spot on the beach where she liked to attach her hammock and read Mills and Boons. He teased her as he admonished her for reading such rubbish, and she made fun of his English accent. She watched him as he built boats with the fishermen who had saved his life. Everyone knew him as Obroni Tom. He became a much-loved part of the village of Elmina. One day, Abena asked Tom if he really wanted to find his way back to England. They were on the beach, and Tom was hanging his feet on the hammock as Abena lay in it, his back on the warm sand and his hands under his head. "Actually, Abena, I don't really want to go back," he said to her, staring into the distance. "Why not? Don't you miss your family?" "I do, in a way," Tom replied, turning to look up at her. She caught his eyes for a brief second as he looked pensively at her. Abena felt strange. She looked away, unsure of herself all of a sudden. Tom got up. "Actually, I spoke to Mum last week." He leaned against a bendy coconut tree, his hands in his pockets. "Your dad took me to Cape Coast and I was able to make a call to her." He sat on the coconut tree. "I realized I didn't have to go back there at all. I found something here that I didn't even know existed." "What's that?" Abena asked. Tom smiled for a second and then his face got serious again. "Look at this place, Abena. You know, I would have killed for a chance to live here. Look at your family. You guys, they know me from Adam. But you took me in and cared for me and got me back on my feet. You treat me with so much love, like I was an important person or something." Abena pulled a face at him. "You are an important person, Tom," she said, smiling at him. He winced. "Nah, I'm just a university dropout who had an idea to sail around the world, Abena," he said quietly. "I don't know what I was looking for, but I think I found it now." "What?" Abena asked again. "Peace." Tom said it so quietly she barely heard it. "I found peace here, Abena," he said, smacking his lips together. "Were you not at peace before, Tom?" she asked him. She looked up at him as he approached her. "You wouldn't understand, Abena," he said simply as he headed into the water, seemingly having changed his mind about approaching her. "You live in this idyllic place full of love and harmony and joy. You wouldn't understand my complicated life." "Tell me about your complicated life." Tom walked back towards Abena. "No, Abena," he said. He came close to her and touched her hair. "You are the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, Abena," he said. Abena froze. She felt weird. Her cheeks felt hot. Her heart started pounding. She got up from the hammock. Tom followed her and stood facing her. He leaned in for a kiss. Abena kissed him back. Then she pushed him away. "No, Tom, you shouldn't do that." She leapt out of the hammock and fled to her house, leaving Tom bewildered and bereft at the beach. In the days that followed, Abena tried hard to avoid Tom whenever she could. She was confused and upset. She had never felt this way before, and she was a little perplexed by Tom's reaction to her. He was like a brother to her now. She loved him very much, but not in that way. He was a part of her family. She was afraid to be near him now. She couldn't explain her feelings to her parents, even though they noticed she was apprehensive around Tom and asked what was eating her. She went often to the beach alone. Miraculously, Tom would always appear within minutes. Once, she let down her guard and started talking to him as he came closer to stand by her. It wasn't long before they were passionately kissing. She had to flee once again. One day, she asked her mum to make arrangements for her to attend the Winneba Teacher Training College, where she would be a boarder. She needed to get away from Tom. Tom watched on helplessly as Abena packed a few belongings and moved away from home. He knew exactly why she was moving away. He asked himself if he had come on too strong. He shouldn't have blurted out what he did to her. He knew that now. He realized that she was only a simple girl, probably never had a proper boyfriend before. He was smitten with her and couldn't stop thinking about her. The problem was, there was no one he could talk to about her. He was here, a guest in her home, in her village. No one would support his feelings for her. He considered asking her dad for advice, but then talked himself out of it. When he didn't hear from Abena for 1, then 2 months, then 3 months, Tom knew he had blown it with her. He would never laugh freely with her on the beach again. He would never be able to lean on her slight build as he maneuvered the uneven sand dunes of Elmina with his dodgy left knee. He missed her. He missed her laugh, her innocent joie de vivre. On the first day of the 4th month of no word from Abena, Tom bid his new family goodbye and sadly plonking his suitcase into a taxi, he made his way to Kotoka International Airport to finally fly back to England, to his old life that he wanted to say goodbye to forever. 30 years later, Abena was tired. All she wanted to do was sleep, but she was too excited to do so. The events of the last 2 weeks were playing themselves in her mind like a film. She pondered how life could be so full of mystery and coincidences. She smiled at Nanama, her little granddaughter. She caught her breath as the baby smiled back at her. That smile was so like her mother's smile. Tears involuntarily sprung to her eyes. She could hear the air hostess announcing about duty-free. She wasn't interested in that. She looked over Sehewa's shoulder at the view of London she could make out from the little window next to her daughter. Sehewa looked sleepy, even though she was wide awake by now. Nanaoma was now playing pinkies with the passenger behind her mother's seat. The young lady was probably from Australia from her accent. She seemed enamored with Nanaama, and she with her. Abena smiled. Nanaama really had the outgoing personality of her own mother for sure. She wondered if she could be the reincarnation of her mother sometimes. It was so strange that Sewa decided to become a nurse like her grandmother, Abena's mother, after the birth of Nanaama. It was like a switch. She woke up one morning and declared to everyone that she was going to be a nurse. She was going to nursing school, just like that. She missed her grandma a lot. When she was 5, her grandma, Dori, suddenly died of a heart attack while she was babysitting Sewa. Abena and her husband Ato came home from shopping in Gomoa that Saturday morning, expecting her mother Dori to be looking after Sewa as usual. Abena was 5 months pregnant at the time with Obing when it happened. They arrived in their home and Dori was sprawled lifeless on the floor while Sewa was crying hysterically by her side. Abena would never forget that image. She almost miscarried that day. Atu was a rock to her during that difficult time. He had lost his own mother when he was young, so he knew exactly how to comfort her. She cried fresh tears of pain when she remembered that just 2 years later, Atu, the love of her life, would also be brutally taken away from her. He died in a car crash on the Cape Coast Accra Road. He stood no chance, according to the police report. He died instantly. The trotro driver who was to blame was never charged due to a technicality. She felt physically sick as she recalled the years of civil lawsuits that followed, all to no avail. In the end, she was left to raise 2 children on her own, with no compensation from the people who had caused her beloved husband's death. Luckily, her teacher training certificate enabled her to make a decent life for herself. She had met Atu at the teacher training college in Winneba, of course, and she fell so madly in love with him that she was definitely distracted by him. Luckily, she heeded her mother's advice to take her studies seriously and managed to pass all her exams. Atu was the bright one in her class. He sailed through all the exams with not so much as a sweat. He got a very good job in Adesado and was able to put them all in a nice home before he passed. Her father continued working even into his retirement years to keep supporting her and Sewa and Obeng. Now Sewa was a mother of a beautiful baby girl, the pride of the Opong family, and Obeng was training to be an architect. She was proud of her children. Considering they did not get to know their dad very well, they turned out good. Of course, they had the benefit of their 2 amazing uncles, Yao and Peter, who were just the best supportive brothers she could ever have wished for. Abena had often thought of Tom Weston, but over the years she pushed him to the back of her mind, until, that is, she got the surprise of her life just 2 weeks ago. She was out front with Nanama, watering the flowers in the garden, when she saw a young man walking towards her. She could see that he had just got out of a car. She could see a young woman in the car. The young man approached her gingerly and kept looking back towards the car as though unsure of himself. She smiled sweetly at him. A fleeting thought of, oh, if Sewa's boyfriend had looked this smart and serious, she wouldn't have minded at all. Instead, she chose to involve herself with some riffraff that was Nanama's dad. Shaking her head, she shuddered. At least now she had decided to make good of her life. After Nanama's birth, she seemed to have matured. She was always a good girl, so it was a mystery to her as to why she got herself involved with that boy in the first place. Modern love, she sighed to herself. Her reverie was interrupted by the surprisingly soft voice of the young man. "Excuse me, madame," he said, in what she identified as a Ga accent. He was clearly an Accra boy. "Are you Mrs. Opong?" She wondered how he knew. As she nodded at him, she noticed that the young woman in the car had now got out and was watching them. "Oh, madame, I'm so happy I found you," the young man exclaimed, looking relieved. He smiled at the young woman, and she came towards them, almost skipping. As she got closer, Abena now noticed that she was biracial. "Mrs. Opong, oh my God, I can't believe I'm finally meeting you." The young woman virtually threw herself into Abena's arms and gave her a bear hug. "Nice to meet you too, young lady," Abena exclaimed, going with the flow and wondering what this Obroniba was smoking. No one had treated her with so much unbridled energy and attention as this young woman was doing right now. The young Accra man was regarding both of them with amusement. "Mrs. Opong, I'm so happy to finally meet you. My name is Anna Weston, and this is my fiancé, Ebo. We are getting married in London in 1 month, and I want you so much to be there. Abena took a step back. What is your name? She could barely manage more than a whisper. Anna Weston. Yes, Tom's daughter, the woman said. Abena could not believe her ears. You are Tom's daughter? She blurted out, now starting to see the resemblance. Yes. Abena hugged the woman so tight she almost cut off her lungs from air. And so the tale unfolded. Anna's mother was a beautiful Ghanaian model whose father was a diplomat in London. She and Tom had dated for a year before she broke his heart by dating his best friend, the same best friend he often went sailing with. Hurt by the betrayal, he and his friend parted ways when they sailed to South America, and he continued aimlessly alone on the high seas until he got shipwrecked off the coast of Elmina. When Abena rejected him, he hot-footed it back to London and tried to make a go of it with his ex-girlfriend. After she fell pregnant, their relationship started falling apart, and by the time Anna was born, they were barely speaking. She took Anna with her to Russia with her oligarch boyfriend until one day, Tom got a call that she had died of an overdose. He was in Russia the next day to collect his daughter. He had raised Anna alone, and she was his pride and joy. When Anna brought home a Ghanaian boyfriend, he couldn't help but laugh at the seemingly endless connections he had with this country. He started to confide in Anna about his long-lost love in Ghana and how he never forgot her and was too afraid of another rejection from her to fight for her. Last he heard, she had gotten married to a local man. And then, one day, Ebo's father informed him that Abena's husband had passed away. And yet, he still didn't want to rock the boat and make his move. Anna, who dearly loved her dad, decided to take matters into her own hands and got Ebo to do some spying around. They discovered that Abena had remained single. On the occasion of their wedding in London, they decided to invite Abena to London to the festivities. And what better way to do it than in person in Elmina, where it had all begun for Tom 30 years earlier. And here she was, on a plane to Heathrow, about to meet the enigmatic, bold boy she was too scared to love all those years ago when she was a wee young girl sitting on a hammock on the beach. By the time the Boeing 757 touched down at Heathrow, Abena had full-blown palpitations. It was the easiest thing in the world to spot Tom, standing there in arrivals, his arm around Anna, as Ebo stood next to him. He looked exactly the same. He hadn't aged 1 day since that fateful day in Elmina. The same tousled blonde hair, now a little grayer, but not much. The same lean, strong frame. As Abena ran to embrace him, as he did the same, she knew she was about to become a Western.